This video is all about isometric exercises for Achilles injuries. We're thinking Achilles tendinitis, tendinopathy, even Achilles tendon tears. I'm going to demonstrate 3 different positions you can do them in, and I'll also explain how you can adapt them for different conditions and what type of injuries will benefit most from each type of adaptation. As always, I've included a section on the research. What are the true benefits for isometrics for Achilles injuries? Because not everything people claim is actually true when it comes to isometrics. And if you jump right to the end, there's a section that I've included about how we actually decide when we include isometrics for our patients, because not everybody will benefit from them, and some people will actually be wasting their time. There are better exercises for them to do. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maryke. I'm one of the physiotherapists from treatmyachilles.com, where you can get online physiotherapy assessment as well as treatment for any type of Achilles injury, all done via video call. Now, I realize that sounds a bit weird because how are we meant to assess you and treat you if we can't touch you? But we explain in detail on our website why video consultations can work so well for assessment as well as treatment for the type of injuries we treat. So have a look at the description of this video. I've put a link to our website there if you want more information. What is an isometric contraction? Well, while you're listening to this, just clench your bum muscles, tighten them up. That's an isometric contraction of your glute muscles. You're tensing the muscles, but nothing in the body is actually moving. For the Achilles tendon, an example of one might be if you raise up on your toes and you just hold that position. There are plenty of different ways to do it in, so let's have a look at how you can do them. One of the most common questions we get asked about isometrics is how high should you be lifting? It really depends on what type of injury you have and also what your goal is with doing them. So let's look at the 3 different kind of levels you can go at and when they might be useful. The first one is when you go to neutral level and you need a step for that or a thick book. And I'm going to use a thick book, just one, because otherwise it'll slide off. So what you're doing here, and remember you can do 2 feet together or 1 leg. I'll discuss why that might be useful in a minute, the different types. I'm going to use 1 foot for demonstration purposes because I don't have enough space here. Actually, I could do 2 feet if I wanted to. So for neutral, you're basically just standing on a step or a thick book and you're letting your heels come over the edge, but you're not dropping them down. So you're keeping it at the level of the step or level with the floor. Isometrics in this neutral position is most useful for people who struggle with pain in the front of their feet. For Achilles injuries, calf raises are the most useful exercise to do. But if you've got pain in that ball of the foot like metatarsalgia or even what's it called, Morton's neuroma, where the little nerve is irritated, then going up on your toes can really make that discomfort worse. So keeping it in that neutral position limits how much pressure goes through that area and can feel more comfortable. They can sometimes irritate insertional Achilles tendinitis. So if you've got pain right where the Achilles attaches into the heel bone, then sometimes that can cause increased pressure and irritate it more. And also if you've got bursitis, but it doesn't irritate everybody's case. So test it. As with all exercises, we always tell our patients to test it and then observe the 24-hour response. A small increase in discomfort, so you're more aware of it, is fine as long as it settles quickly. A dramatic increase in discomfort usually means you want to be trying something else or adjusting how you're doing them. And it might be better then to try the lifted version I'll show in a minute or actually do a totally different exercise. Next up, we've got the version where you actually lift your heel up. And you can do them on a step again, but you can also just do them on the floor. So what you're doing is you support yourself, so you've got good balance, and you just lift up and you hold the position. And your physio will help you understand if you do them on 1 leg, 2 legs, or with extra weight. Those are all things that will be determined by how sensitive your tendon is, but I'll talk about that a bit in a moment. How high do you actually want to lift during this lifted version? So it really depends. If you're doing them for pain relief, it's all about where do you find it most appropriate. So it's got to feel comfortable while you're doing it then. And you can play with whatever feels best for you. So for instance, if you find that it irritates it if you hold it at that level, you could try it a little bit higher and see if that helps. If you're doing it to improve the Achilles' strength, then your physio will tell you in what range to hold it, because usually we want to target the range that you lack most strength in. However, if you're just doing it for general strength increase as a starter to your program, it doesn't really matter where you hold it. Any start will then help, and then as soon as you can, the physio will move you on to other types of exercises. The only position that's really not that useful to do for most people is to try and really force it that you get that very, very high position. So what I'm talking about is if you really force it all the way up there. And the reason why that can sometimes cause trouble is if you've got an injury, it's normal for that tissue to be a bit swollen, and then you can pinch the injured tissue and that can cause pain. So if you're going up quite high and you're finding that it causes pain, it may just be that you're pinching something that's irritated. So just come down a little bit. The only time when doing isometrics in that range could be useful is for dancers, because dancers do need that full range of motion. But it might also have to wait till a little bit later in the rehab process. The third version is with the heel actually dropping over the side of the step. So we're going to use a thick book again, and you're not looking to drop it as low as you can go. You're just looking for about a 10 degrees angle in your ankle. So about 10 degrees dorsiflexion. And the reason for this is you still should be contracting your calf muscles to maintain the position. If you're just hanging there passively, that means that you're just doing a passive stretch. There's no isometric movement, and that's a total different exercise. So to do the heel drop isometrics, you drop your heel just below the level of the step, about 10 degrees, and just contract your muscle and keep that. Heel dropped isometrics are quite good at lengthening the muscles as well as the Achilles tendon, and can even be used for stiff ankle joints. However, we never use them for Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy, especially if it's insertional or there's bursitis, because that usually just makes the pain worse, and it's not the type of exercise that's actually going to help you recover. Where they can be useful is after you've had surgery, but in the later stages of that. So after 12 weeks, you don't really want to do such strong stretches before 12 weeks because you can actually have worse outcomes then. We've made videos about the best rehab protocols for Achilles tendonitis as well as after surgery and how you want to put your exercise together. So I'll put links to those videos in the description of this video. Go have a look if you want to know more about that. How heavy should you be going? How long should you be holding it for? And how often should you be doing it? Well, we can't really get a clear answer for that from the research. The original study that showed that it was useful for pain relief was for the knee, for patellar tendonitis, and they used 5 sets of 45 seconds and heavy weights. But that study has not been really replicated. When researchers tried to mimic that study for other tendons, and specifically for the Achilles tendon, they didn't find the same results. They either found that it didn't work at all, or it made it worse, or it worked really well. So it's clear that it doesn't work for everybody, but it may work for some people. When it comes to strength gains, there's not really any studies that's looked at what the best dosage is for patients to gain strength. So we find it best to really tailor it to the patient. So let's look at how you may tailor it to the patient and when to decide what to do, which one. If we look at how much weight to use first, if your tendon is really sensitive, so really easy to flare up, then it's usually best to start with lighter weights. And if you have a tendon that's perhaps not that strong, so you've not been doing a lot of Achilles tendon loading sports, if you're not somebody who's sporty at all, or you've had a very long period where you've not done sports because of the pain, then you probably also want to start with a lighter weight. It will be tolerated better. However, if you're somebody who's been doing tendon loading sports continuously until this point, and it's not super sensitive, then you may actually be able to start with quite heavy loads. Now remember, it's not just about the weight you use, it's also for somebody with a sensitive tendon, it may mean that you actually just do double leg ones without any extra weight. For somebody with a tendon that's not that sensitive, it could be that they actually do single leg calf raises and with extra weight in that position. So it just depends on the person. How do you know who you are? Well, it's your history and everything we understand from how your tendon reacts from other things you do in the day that helps us form an understanding of what will work best. Also, we usually get our patients to perform specific exercises in front of the camera for us during our consultations, which then means that we've got a good idea of what that tendon can tolerate. The same goes for repetitions. If somebody has a very sensitive tendon, or they're just very nervous of starting with exercise, we would start with fewer repetitions, like 3 maximum. But if somebody's tendon is quite strong and they've been doing sport all this time, it's not easy to flare up, 5 repetitions may be a good starting point. Also, if we think of hold times, again, somebody with a sensitive tendon or a tendon that, if they're just very nervous of starting exercise, doing shorter holds like 10-second holds, even a few seconds can be the place to start. Whereas somebody with a tendon that's quite happy to take load can probably jump in with 30 seconds to 45 seconds even. It just depends on the person in front of you. So you have to adapt it. But also, if you do only start with a few seconds, you would normally then progress that to become longer over time. So it's not useful to just stick to the same dose for several weeks in one go. And remember, you also have to rest between the repetitions. It's not just immediately do the next one. You've got to give your calf and your Achilles time to recover. Now, the rough rule with rest periods is that the longer you hold it for, or the heavier the weight, the more recovery you need and the more you'll benefit from it. So if you're doing really low load and it is only like 10 seconds, you probably only need a 10 to 20 second recovery period. But if you're doing heavy loads, and for like 45 seconds, you likely will benefit from longer, like 2 minutes recovery between repetitions. If we think of how often you can do them, so can you do them daily? Do you need a recovery day between? Well, isometrics can usually be done daily because they're not that taxing on the Achilles tendon or the calves. Even if you do them really heavy, some people can do them every single day, and sometimes even more than once a day, but it depends on the case. Also, some people where the tendon is really sensitive or they're just not that strong, it may actually count as a heavy exercise for them, and they do better with a recovery day between. The physiotherapist you see or consult will help you understand through their assessment what the best frequency is for you. I should also just highlight that these are just examples. Your physio may give you a totally different thing to do, and that's absolutely fine. It may be better for your case. There are 4 ways in which isometrics are thought to help Achilles injuries. And I say thought because we're going to look at the research in a minute whether this is actually true. The first is that it can help reduce your pain when you've got Achilles tendinopathy or tendonitis. The second is that it can improve your strength, either for Achilles tendonitis or other injuries like Achilles tendon tears. Then it's particularly prescribed often for patients who are in the competition phase of their sport, because it's thought to help with pain relief and also maintain strength and capacity of the injured tendon during that period. And then fourth, it is prescribed because it's thought to help lengthen the Achilles tendon and calf or make it more flexible. So let's look at the research. Are these useful and are they even needed? If we look at the research on pain relief for Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy first, the short answer is that yes, it can help reduce your pain in the long term, so over a long period of time, but it's unlikely to give you immediate pain relief. And the reason I say this is that that claim that was made after the initial research that came out for the knee, the patellar tendon, was that isometrics can reduce your pain immediately and therefore are super useful for Achilles tendonitis rehab. But when researchers tested that for other tendons as well as specifically for the Achilles tendon, they didn't actually find the same results. Some studies couldn't replicate it at all, that there was no benefit, and others found that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it makes it worse, and it's really no better than any other types of exercise that you do. So it's something that's useful as part of a rehab plan, but it's not necessarily needed for everybody, and it's also not going to work for everybody. So it's about choosing it for the correct patient. Can isometrics actually make your tendons stronger? Yep. There is evidence that if you include it as part of your rehab, then it can help you do more tendon loading activities, which shows us that the tendon's capacity to carry load, which means its strength, has improved. When it comes to competition phase, there are 2 main reasons why people often want to include isometrics into a training plan for somebody who develops Achilles tendonitis during that period. And the first is because it's thought to help reduce the pain. Now, we've just seen that it works for some people and not for others. If it helps you feel more comfortable and do more training and cope better, it's definitely something to try. The second reason they often say to include it is to maintain your Achilles strength and tolerance to load bearing. But if you're already doing Achilles tendon loading sport, your Achilles is in any case getting a strength stimulus and growing stronger. So it doesn't really need extra exercises on top to do that. Also, it's worth remembering that Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy is an overload or overuse injury. And often if you whack more exercise on top, it then just increases the overload. So what we find a lot more useful for our patients is if we actually help them figure out how to include relative rest in their training plan, so they can maintain their fitness, perform at a really high level, but also allow the Achilles to just recover a bit more. Some of the ways that you can do that include just increasing your recovery time after sessions, especially hard training sessions. Maybe taking some of the hard sessions out of there if you, in any case, doing loads of competition. Substituting some of your training with cross training, like for runners, for instance, doing the cross trainer can be quite useful. It may also just be that you reduce your volume of exercise. So if you think of the runs you do, not as many runs, pick the runs that really matter in the week, or change the terrain. If you're doing flatter runs, it can be more useful than running uphill, because uphill running taxes the Achilles tendon more. So there are loads of ways to adapt training for different types of sports, and depending on your goal really as well, because how you adapt it for marathon training will be very different from a sprinter, for instance, because they've got different things they want to achieve. This is one of the things we do really well via video call. So if you want help with that, please feel free to reach out. The link is in the description of this video. How about calf and Achilles flexibility or length? Can isometrics be useful for that? So we're talking about the heel dropped isometrics specifically here, where you do them with your heel below the level of the step. The research shows that yes, it can cause muscle tissue to permanently lengthen. So if your calf muscles are really inflexible, that can help. There's no research, as far as I know, that's actually looked into whether it causes any permanent length changes for your Achilles tendon specifically. I will also say, if you have Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy, do not do this as an exercise. I know your Achilles tendon is feeling very stiff and tight likely, but that's not the type of stiffness that you can stretch out of it. We find in the majority of patients, if you do isometrics in that stretch position, it can really flare them up. The isometrics for improving flexibility is much more useful for your Achilles tendon tear rehab, but also only later in the rehab process. So we're talking after 12 weeks. If you do it too early in the rehab, it can also cause trouble in some cases. The one thing that the researchers agree on is that Achilles tendon rehab plans and exercise plans are only really effective if they start at the correct level for you, so match your tendon's current strength as well as sensitivity, and they progress slowly over time to eventually build the strength and capacity you need for the goal you've got. So that could be walking, that could be a sport, any activity you want to be doing. You've got to build it up to that level. We can think of your Achilles tendon strength and sensitivity as your tendon's current capacity for load bearing. So what is your Achilles tendon happy to do at the moment without flaring up? And how we know that is we combine a few things. So we first of all listen to our patient. What are they telling us about what they've been doing in the last couple of weeks? How did their tendon react to that? How did it affect their symptoms? But then we also combine it with some movement tests, which we get them to do and observe via the video call, so that we can understand, okay, how are they performing these things? Are they easy? Are they difficult? How's it affecting their tendon while they're doing it? And then we decide whether we use isometrics or some other type of exercise, because it depends on the starting point. There are 4 main reasons why we might start somebody's plan with isometrics. And the first is, if you find them challenging. If they're quite challenging to do, then yep, they might be worth including. If you find them easy, there's really no reason to waste your time with them. There are other exercises that can work better. And by the way, I'll put links to other types of exercise videos in the description of this one. But second, they also shouldn't be causing more than an acceptable level of pain. The research is clear. It's absolutely fine to get some discomfort while you're doing your exercises and even afterwards, but it shouldn't be a significant increase in your discomfort. And your physio will explain during your session what is appropriate in your case. Then also, we only include them if you can't start with isotonics, where you lift up and down on your toes, because in most cases, we find people benefit more from actually including those. Also, they may be a useful starting point if you get pain in the front of your foot. So you've got metatarsalgia or neuromas. In fact, they may even be needed later in rehab then and continuously progressed if that's the case, because often people with those issues can't actually go up on their toes comfortably and it always flares them up. So it just depends on your case. We may also include them later in the rehab, especially for people who have had Achilles tendon surgery. It could be a useful thing after 12 weeks to help improve the flexibility of the calf as well as Achilles tendon. But it really just depends on the case. And remember, this is not set in stone. There may be other reasons why your physio includes them into your plan, and they can be useful for other things as well. These are just the main reasons. If you're looking for more information about exercises, have a look at the description of this video. I'll put links to them there. If you've got any questions, just ask them in the comments. And if you need more help with your injury, you're welcome to consult one of the team via video call. The link to the website is in the description of this video. Take care.